Hello YouTube, it's me, Ruth again. So today, as it's the beginning of November, I thought I would talk about the books that I read in October and do also a Witchathon wrap-up. Now, I only ended up finishing one of my Witchathon books, but it was a really hard book to get through, so I'm not terribly upset about that. I'm kind of proud of it anyway. But yeah, so I'll just go through the books I read in October. The first book I finished in October anyway, was Scythe by Neil Shusterman, and I don't have that because it was a library book and I already had to return the book, but I'll put a image up for it here. The reason why I read Scythe is because it actually kind of sounded kind of similar to a book I'm writing, specifically the book I'm writing for NaNoWriMo this year, which I'm currently working on right now. So it's about a world in which there's like no death, no suffering, no disease. Everybody who tries to kill themselves gets brought back to life. Basically like a utopian society, but then there are these scythes that their job is to go around and basically kill people to prevent overpopulation, I guess. But they, you know, a lot less people die from the scythes than who had died in previous society, so it's still better, I guess. I really enjoyed Scythe. I gave it 4 stars. I think the thing that prevented me from giving it all 5 was the fact that it took me a really long time to connect with the characters. There are 2 main characters, Rowan and Citra, and they're both taken in by a scythe and trained as his apprentice. Whoever does the best at being an apprentice will be sworn in as a scythe at the end of a year. So that's what the whole conflict is about, basically. But it took me a really long time to connect with Rowan and Citra, even though it's from both of their points of view. I don't know, I just felt like it was very distanced from them, the narrative was, but I did really enjoy the plot and I really enjoyed the world. So I do recommend reading Scythe, and I do plan on reading the sequels as well. The second book I finished in October was a book called Creating Character Arcs by K.M. Weiland. I read this as it's a writing book about crafting good character arcs. And I felt like really good. I gave it 5 stars actually, because it just it had like 3 different types of character arcs: positive, flat, and negative character arcs, and went through each character arc and then broke down the negative character arcs into 3 other character arcs. So it broke down all of those character arcs and asked like really interesting questions for each of them that you could apply to your own novel. And I plan on going through the workbook after I write the first draft of what I'm writing now for NaNoWriMo. I plan on going through the workbook version of this book and really delving into those questions and answering them about my book and seeing how my character arcs are and using it to really flesh out my character arcs. So yeah, if you're a writer and write novels, I highly recommend Creating Character Arcs by K.M. Weiland. Yeah. Alright, so the next book I finished in October was The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Ahdieh. I think that's how you pronounce her name. This book I also really enjoyed. I think I also gave it 4 stars. It's a retelling of the Shahrazad story, which is about a woman who volunteers to marry a sultan who kills all of his brides at dawn. So he marries a different bride every night and then kills them at dawn for some reason. That's basically the whole plot of this book. Is the main character is Shahrazad, and she goes, and her best friend I think was one of the brides that was killed by the sultan, and so she wants to go and kill the sultan marry him and then trick him into not killing her by telling him stories, which is in the original Shahrazad story. Like the way that she gets to not die is that she tells him a story every night and kind of ends in the middle of the story at dawn, and so he lets her live so he can hear the next part of the story the next night. The Shahrazad in this novel does pretty much the same thing, only her goal is to kill the sultan when she gets a chance, and so she's trying to like lull him into a false sense of security and then kill him when she gets the chance. So I thought this was really good. Obviously there's a lot of mystery as to why the Sultan is killing his brides, and this kind of delves into that whole why he's doing it thing. I really liked it. I really liked the writing style. I got through it pretty quickly. I thought Renee Ahdieh has a really beautiful writing style, and I just really connected with the main character. And I don't know why I gave it 4 stars instead of 5. I think it was because of the ending. I found the ending to be a little bit lacking. It was very cliffhangery. Obviously there's a second book and I plan to read it, but I just didn't like how cliffhangery the ending was and how it just kind of ended really abruptly. So that's why I gave it 4 stars instead of 5. And the next book I finished in October was a book called The Kingmakers Daughter by Philippa Gregory. This one I listened to on audiobook and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars as well. I've been making my way through all of Philippa Gregory's Plantagenet and Tudor novels. Well, the Plantagenet novels, I've already read all the Tudor novels, and this one was about, it's hard to explain if you don't really know the history, but there's the guy who basically got Edward VI on the throne, his daughters, and how he was pretty much using them as pawns to get a child on the throne of England, and how each of those daughters is kind of, he kind of switches favor from one daughter to the other as he is able to come up with a plan to put one or the other on the throne of England. Felt very like Game of Thrones-esque, how ruthless some of the deaths that happened in it were, and it's all like true story, real life, so it was really interesting to read. Yeah, and the daughter who is the main character in the story, Anne Neville, she is the eventual wife of Richard III, who is a pretty famous king, if you don't know. There's a whole Shakespeare play about him, so seeing that whole story of Richard III from her perspective as well was really interesting. So yeah, I think I gave it 4 stars instead of 5, simply because it wasn't perfect, but it was still really good. And then the last book I finished in October was the one book I read for Witchathon, and that was Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. And this book I gave 3 stars. I didn't love it. It was super difficult to read, but I did like it. I did find the world really interesting, and I did really like the characters of Gideon and Harrowhark, and I liked where their relationship went over the course of the story. It was completely different than any book I've ever read. There are lots of skeletons. There's lots of bringing people back from, well, not bringing people back from the dead necessarily, but bringing skeletons back to use as minions basically, and they're like super into like dark books or like really intricate fantasies, and this is space fantasy, so it's like a science fantasy type of book, then I would recommend it. But if you're not really into super intricate fantasies and don't have the patience for it, which I kind of am losing my patience for it, then I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. But yeah, I did really like the characters, and I thought a lot of it was really funny. And yeah, so that's all I have to say about Gideon the Ninth, and this is the only book I finished for Witchathon, even though I had a whole TBR for it, but I'm glad I got through it. And my parents turned on the television, so I guess that it's time for me to go. So if they are new here, please like and subscribe and leave a comment and let me know you watched. And yeah, that's all I have for today. My next video will probably be about NaNoWriMo, which just started. I'm going to be writing all month for it, so next week I might talk a bit about what I'm writing. So yeah, see you next week.